Situated in Indio, California, this is Fantasy Springs Resort. In its right wing, it houses the casino. In the center, the hotel. And at its entrance, the bingo hall. Built in 2003 and first opening on December 21, 2004, this neon oasis flooded Indio, California with a new attraction. Owned by the Cabazon band of Cahuilla Indians, it's their economic powerhouse, contributing millions annually to the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry. But its significance runs deeper, rooted in a historic legal battle that reshaped the landscape of Native American sovereignty and economic self-sufficiency. As we look across the United States, the location of resorts and casinos like Fantasy Springs may seem random, but when we zoom into these regions, we find that an overwhelming amount of them appear over Native American reservations. $40.9 billion of the aforementioned $59.84 came from tribal-owned casinos, but how did this come to be? The history here at Fantasy Springs Resort marked the beginning of lengthy litigation that ultimately resolved with the emergence of Indian gaming throughout the United States. In 1830, 7th President Andrew Jackson initiated the Indian Removal Act, which according to him would strengthen the southwestern frontier. He believed that it would allow the new states like Alabama to advance rapidly in population. Tribes like the Cherokee refused to leave their territories, but eventually, many Native Americans were forced out of their lands into an Indian reservation located in Oklahoma. This was also known as the Trail of Tears. The aftermath? Thousands of deaths of Native Americans, and many others that were forced to leave their homes, lives, and families. Jackson's plans to continue westward expansion were a huge success for the United States. For the natives, it was the most devastating turn of events that they had ever seen. The natives continued to lose their land, as Western settlers continued to branch out into other regions, and through lies and broken promises from the US government, the brutal killings of the Indians even persisted throughout the late 19th century, like those at the Wounded Knee Massacre. In addition to this violence, the US decided to take on the path of assimilation. They took children from reservations and put them in boarding schools where they would be quote-unquote Americanized by the teachers there. The Native Americans would lose a lot of their strength following these events, never going back to what they once were before the first European contact in 1492. One of the major effects of reducing native lands to small reservations was insustainability. Lack of fertile land and economic neglect led to a scarcity in education, job opportunities, and public infrastructure. For the Cabazon band, they attempted to solve these issues by searching for new business. We came in contact with tribal leader Brenda Soulier and Tawny Williamson to gain more insight on this process.
We started with a cigarette shop, which was like a single wide trailer. Then a year or so after that, we built it into a bigger warehouse, and we were shipping cigarettes. The warehouse, we sold cigarettes, and we morphed into selling alcohol. The reasons we could do that is because there was a little stamp on each of the cartons and each of the alcohol. So we're a sovereign nation. We didn't have to pay that tax.
In Washington v. Confederated Bands and Tribes of Yakama Nation, 1979, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the state of Washington, ruling against the tribe's three arguments: that tribes had their own taxing ordinances, that the state's cigarette tax interfered with tribal sovereignty, and that Chapter 36, the state law imposing cigarette tax, was in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
They ended up having to pay taxes on that, and that affected us as well.
The result of this case endangered the sanctity of sovereignty as tribes had lost their economic advantage. Desperate to find another source of income, the Cabazons opened a card room.
So we couldn't be a price advantage at that time. So started looking for other economic development for the reservation, and we found some people that were looking to put in a California card room. So we opened one up, they invested, we changed it over, we opened up the card room, and then that's when they came and raided us. And it actually became quite a bit of hypocrisy in that, California can do this, but we can't. We got an injunction from the court, we're able to open back up again. And then we were raided by Riverside County Sheriff, and then got shut down again. California got involved in the appeal, and that's when it turned into California versus Cabazon. So I think that's when we just got tired of being told no.
California argued 3 points. First, the county contended that regulatory power had been granted by Public Law 280. Section 1 of Public Law 280 had been written loosely, and essentially gave itself full civil jurisdiction over tribal lands. In California v. Cabazon, the Supreme Court interpreted in Public Law 280 that the state could not apply its laws to reservations without the permission of Congress. Section 2 of Public Law 280 gave the state regulation over criminal law, which applied to reservations. The state cited Section 18 of the Organized Crime Control Act, ACA. It states illegal gambling business means a gambling business which is a violation of the law of a state or political subdivision in which it is conducted. In total, California hoped to claim jurisdiction over Cabazonian gambling because it was an illegal gambling business. The court deemed the citation inapplicable as the application of ACA did not apply to sovereign reservations as it was once again dependent on state law. Lastly, California argued for state gambling laws to be applicable to reservations by federal common law in hopes to prevent a rise in organized crime. The court deemed the state's interest as weak as Californian law only dealt with operations of gambling, asserting that there was no evidence the state was primarily concerned with preventing organized crimes, as their current state laws directed themselves solely at on-reservation conduct of tribes. In a 6-3 conclusion in favor of the Cabazon ban, tribal sovereignty was fully defined since the creation of the Union. State laws required consent from Congress in order to apply for reservation land. Going forward, the regulation of state laws had to prove significant enough to outweigh the interests of both the federal government and tribal authorities. In the case of the Cabazon, and many other Native American tribes, gaming provided revenue critical to the economic self-sufficiency of the reservation. While bittersweet, tribes had retained their autonomy after centuries of suffering, now having the ability to declare themselves as sovereign nations working alongside the US, not just land bounded inside of it.
So how really did the court case affect the Cabazon tribe? Well, there were both positives and negatives. Starting with the positives, in a study conducted at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they found that Indian gaming correlated to a decrease in smoking, heavy drinking, and in obesity. But more importantly, they found that reservations with gaming experienced increases in employment of about 26%. The case has also enabled the Cabazons and other tribes alike to embrace their culture with tribal traditions, such as the powwow emerging after the case. In the powwow, plains dancers and bird singers engage in drumming and dance competitions, and it is not only a celebration of culture but also a reinforcement of the autonomy within the tribes. But not every consequence of the Cabazon versus California court case was good. The prevalence of gambling and Indian reliance on it as a major source of income has brought to light conflicts within tribes. Tribes involved in gaming redistribute the gaming revenue to fund tribal governmental services, community development, and welfare to tribe members. However, to consolidate more wealth among the few who claim to manage the casinos, tribes are experiencing an epidemic of disenrollment. From over a dozen tribes, over 11,000 tribe members have been forcibly disenrolled, and this greed for more wealth has left certain tribes in danger. There has also been fighting within tribes over ownership of the casinos, with the most extreme cases leading to standoffs or tribes preventing the establishment of casinos on other tribes. Despite these flaws, casinos have been able to serve as a symbol of the relentless pursuit of equality that American Indians have fought for countless decades. However, it cannot be misguided to mean that the government and the average citizen no longer holds any further responsibility to the indigenous people of America.
The 1983 Riverside County Sheriff raid on the Cabazon and the earlier 1981 card room bust by Indio police set into motion the question of the rights of the Cabazon and other native tribes under position as a sovereign nation, but subject to the federal government that eventually snowballed into the Cabazon decision. However, the loosening of regulations limiting gambling presents a dilemma. On one hand, allowing gambling fosters a lucrative, exploitative, and harmful business where tribes acquire money from others' losses. On the other hand, gaming operations provide an unprecedented source of vital income for tribal communities and employment for the most impoverished demographic in America, with revenue raised from gaming used to fund government services for their citizens. Despite its shortcomings, gaming has elevated Native Americans to a level never seen before in the history of the United States.